Today is Friday, April 18th, the anniversary of Paul Revere's Midnight Run, where he rode through the streets screaming,
The British are coming.
no, that's not what he actually said. He said, the regulars are coming out. That is the truth. Everybody says the British are, yeah. So,
The regulars are
tell your
coming
fifth
out?
grade teacher they were wrong. You can check with Google. They said the regulars are coming out. But we're not here to talk about Paul Revere. We're here to talk about another Paul, the co-creator of the show Government Cheese, Paul Hunter. You probably don't know who that is.
I don't.
He's produced films. He's clearly done a TV show now. But before that, he would do a lot of commercials. He's done everything from Nike to Apple, McDonald's. And then his big foray, though, is like music videos. He's worked with every R&B singer you can think of, from the Notorious B.I.G., Marilyn Manson, notorious R&B singer Marilyn Manson, Lenny Kravitz, Dr. Dre, Mariah Carey, Jennifer Lopez, Justin Timberlake, and that's just a handful of the many, many, many people that he's worked with. And this show, Government Cheese, is actually based on his life in a weird way. It's a surrealist comedy produced by Apple. The first 4 episodes are out and they were released on Wednesday, which is a little atypical. Apple likes to usually release 2 or 3 to begin with. I've never really heard of 4, but we'll get into why they did that. The show follows the Chambers family, an African-American family in 1969. They reside in San Fernando Valley. That's the home of Hollywood. Hampton Chambers, the patriarch of the family, is fresh out of jail, and he's looking to make something of himself. And you watched all 4 episodes. This is actually the second Apple comedy review that we've done in a row after Your Friends and Neighbors, the second series where the main character is trying to get back on his feet and ends up stealing, right? But keeping it away from his family.
He hasn't stolen yet.
Except he has, because I did see the part in either the 3rd or 4th episode going around with his partner trying to sell this self-cleaning drill, right?
It's a self-sharpening drill.
Self-sharpening drill, sorry. And he was looking for the best metal to use with it, something super strong, and the guy wouldn't give him a free sample, and so he ends up swiping it, just a little hand action.
It was a marketing event. Yeah.
Right. It was, they had tents and everything, and so he ends up taking there. Now, he didn't do the big theft that I think you were thinking of, which is robbing a temple.
Yeah.
So when you were watching it, did it feel like it was based on someone else's story?
It felt like it was a Boots Riley film.
Right. I'm a Virgo. That's his.
Yes,
show.
right. I'm a Virgo.
Boots Riley was also way into music, or is way into music, so
Right.
that makes sense.
Also, sorry to bother you. Felt like also with the surrealness, a Coen Brothers movie.
This has been like Wes Anderson, Coen Brothers, mix of that. But his father, Paul Hunter's father, did go to prison. He has a brother. The neighbors, the community are all kind of resembling of what he grew up with.
Also kind of them, because during the second Great Migration, a lot of African-American families moved to Los Angeles, and that took place in the 50s, but this was the 60s.
The first season took place in the 50s. The second season took place in the 90s. That was more of a horror element. This is just a family getting by, and it's not necessarily even talking about civil rights or anything, even though it is 1969 in the middle of everything.
1967.
That's when he gets that's the first part of it. By the time the actual show is taking place, it's 69. I do also know that Catch Me If You Can took place in 69, if you're trying to acclimate yourself to that time period. Fight Night, the Kevin Hart thing, which I really thought was related to this show, because he also was trying to make a life for himself. He had a family, and he wasn't above, doing some sketchy stuff. However, the protagonist usually in this type of show is, as long as they show redeeming qualities with how their relationship with their kids and stuff. And Fight Night was 1970 in Georgia with Cassius Clay and all that. And this, again, 1969, Hollywood. And it's just an interesting dynamic. We've sort of seen it before. The co-creator of the show is Aeysha Carr. Her credits include Carmichael's Show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but more importantly, Woke. You remember Woke?
Yeah, Woke was like some cartoonist sees his characters come to life.
Also an autobiographical story of this, like cartoonist in the 90s, I think, where there was a lot of surrealism and absurdity going on when the characters, like you said, came to life and they were moving around, and you have like pencils talking to him. And so I think it was like Paul's vision, and then Aeysha Carr writing most of these episodes. They both have writing credits, but I think it was mostly Aeysha Carr writing and him directing for at least the first 3. And then you bring in a huge cast, or actually a huge cast by name, but actually a small cast by Apple standards. They only ever have like 3 or 4 big stars. But David Oyelowo, who you know from Lawman Bass Reeves, Sheriff Holston Becker from Silo, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. From Selma,
I think
right?
I've only ever seen
He's
Selma.
only ever seems like played really good guys, like really good guys. And so it's funny seeing him play a villain, sort
Well,
of.
it's the thing is that Hampton for the first 4 episodes, the redeeming quality that you were talking about earlier is that he's trying to get back into his family's good graces because the only person that's even happy that he's out of jail is his son Einstein. Aside from
The
that,
older brother.
yes, right, Astoria and Harrison, his other son, they couldn't care less.
And Harrison is sort of Paul.
Yeah.
So that's who he based
Oh,
himself off
okay.
of. So that difficult relationship. He also, his mom's still alive. So he wasn't exactly sure how he was going to like take her elements and not insult her because he loves her, you know. And then also, I think he has a friend, right? The father's cellmate, Hampton's cellmate, is also ends up being friends to Harrison.
Well, it's hard because Rudy is a cellmate that you were talking about, but Rudy dies within the first 10 minutes of the series.
No,
Yeah.
he's the Native American guy?
Yeah.
Okay, well, he must appear in backflashes.
Yeah,
then.
no, he does. What happened was is that he died incidentally when Hampton accidentally stabbed him with like a knife.
Hampton killed his roommate
Yes, Hampton
and
killed
then
his
got
roommate.
released.
Yeah.
Oof, okay. Well, before we jump into that, David Oyelowo, he's also had been in like things like The Help, Lincoln, The Butler. This guy doesn't have
I've
a
seen
bad.
all 3 of those.
Of course you have, because they're like one of the top or 3 of the top rated of the last like 15 years. His worst credit, I think, is A Sound of Thunder, which we've talked about in another series, so I don't have to talk about that. But it's just funny. His Wikipedia page speaks for itself. So Hampton, how does he get out of jail when he's just murdered someone, and also he's supposed to be there for a while?
Well, so he was in for check fraud, as we learned in the 3rd episode.
Same as Catch Me If You Can.
Really, the thing about him stabbing Rudy was that it was a mistake because a prison riot suddenly broke out kind of out of nowhere.
You mistakenly stab the closest ally of yours.
He picked up a knife, and then Rudy came up to him behind him, and then he stabbed him in the chest. And then
And that's when they release him.
That's supposed to be, well, they understood because the prison riot was not started by him. It was actually started by Jung-gi, who we learn more about in the 2nd episode.
Really?
But
Okay.
that's supposed to be kind of the event that leads Hampton into becoming a Christian. Like, there's even this cool scene where it suddenly goes underwater because there's water inside this room where Rudy was just stabbed, and he's having to swim towards the Bible, and he clutches it. So that was supposed to be like, okay, so he's a former inmate, comes back to literally and figuratively a broken home with his wife Astoria and Harrison.
And his wife doesn't really care whether or not he's there, right? She's not particularly.
His wife is making him sleep in the garage.
Okay, so is she mad or not?
Yeah, no, she's mad. She's
'Cause
making
I
him
read
sleep in
that
the garage.
it said that she wasn't even mad, that she just kind of was like, all right.
She could be having an affair, or at least like she's seeing someone else. In fact, one of
That's
my
what
favorite
an affair
scenes,
is, so yeah.
one of my favorite scenes is when there's like this wooden pillar in between the screen, and you see David Oyelowo or Hampton on one side and Astoria on the other side, showing the serious split between the two. I thought that was
So
shot
there are
nice.
well-documented fractures in this relationship with him and his kids, and he's there to try to solve those. However, he's gotten out because of a particular reason, and that's what I'm asking you about. His friend, right? It's Bootsy or Busky or Boosty?
Bootsy.
Bootsy, thank you. Okay. He has arranged for him to get out of prison using $2,000 or something like that. That's how much he ends up owing because of some mafia.
It was given by the Prevost brothers, and there's 7 brothers: Patrice, Nicole, Claude, Felix, Juck, Darius, and Junji, who I was talking about. And he doesn't have the money to pay them back, but they go into the full detailed story in like episode 2.
How many criminal siblings did you say there were?
7.
Yes. Okay, so they're like the 7 dwarfs.
Right.
People have compared it, like you said, to the Coen brothers, but that feels much like Guy Ritchie to me. Like the idea of a rival gang out there really hounding some guy, and it's just kind of played for comedy.
Definitely with the surrealness. I mean, like, I think that you were also right on point with Atlanta. My favorite shot from episode 1 is a frog jumping over a pole vault. Definitely.
How about Dope Thief? Because this also had the storyline of juvie or people who were in jail together, and kind of like Bootsy, for instance, I think is only a friend of his because of their criminal history, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that Dope Thief really has anything to do with this. It actually reminded me, strangely enough, especially with the sets, of what kind of Fallout the game in the video series always showed, the old-timey feel of it all.
I think I was saying Dope Thief because, and I do agree with you on that, but I think I'm saying Dope Thief because if you remember, and I want to call him Paperboy the whole time, but he owes money to a gang who's coming after him.
So
And he's also, it's a comedy, and he's also trying to like keep his family alive.
the interesting thing about this series is that it reminded me a lot of Startup for the first 2 episodes, because as we said, he's trying to make this retractable, self-sharpening drill, and then even by the end of the first episode, he becomes partners with a worker named Manny, and then the second episode, it seemed like Junji was going to jump in on the project. He was even saying, hey, we'll clear the debt, my brothers and I will clear the debt if you just give us the invention, and then Hampton was saying like no, and that was actually my favorite part of it, the whole entire fact that it felt like he was actually going somewhere with this invention that he was making. I think the problem with the series was that episode 3 and episode 4 don't focus on that at all.
It's interesting because the third or fourth episode is Paul Hunter's favorite episode. So tell me more about why you didn't. Did you like it though, or was it?
Overall, I thought that the series was fine.
No. I mean,
think
episode 3 and 4.
episode 3 had one of the most predictable twists, but I think that was probably the episode he was talking about the most, because we meet this person named Edith, who is played by its guest star Sunita Mani, and she is someone that, because Hampton learns about Ronald, who Astoria is having the affair with, and he's going to go confront her about it, and then he ends up.
So Astoria is 100% having an affair.
Yeah, I mean, we even see it. They're in a restaurant. She's not even doing that good a job of hiding it, because he learns about the affair from one of his sons.
Okay, which one?
From
Einstein
Einstein, yeah.
Okay, Einstein seems like he's supposed to be a genius. I mean, he got into MIT and stuff like that,
But he's not going to actually be going because he's into pole vaulting.
Right. So why don't they just ask for his advice on things, though? Like, it seems like he would be able to help them out a little bit more, especially with an invention. You would think that a super genius kid would be able to aid in your development of some superpowered drill.
But it seemed like really Einstein was kind of outcast from the family because, like I said, he's the only one that's happy that his dad is even back.
Is he kind of like Atlanta's, what's Paperboy's friend's name?
Darius?
Yeah, is he kind of like Darius, where he's a genius, but he doesn't really show it in the same way?
You can make the comparison, but we definitely get more of a storyline with his other son, Harrison, who is kind of like acting out in school and everything like that.
Yeah, because he's acting out because his dad just came home and he feels distant between the two of them. And then Bokeem Woodbine, the guy who plays Buddy Bootsy, you would probably know from Fargo season 2. He was in Ripley, Halo, Snowfall. Now he's in Government Cheese. But no, he's really famous. When you see his face, like, you know who he is. He's that type of character. He was based on 2 people, I think, that they merged into one, and he's supposed to be a little wacko. He's
the middleman.
He's a wild card there, right?
He's the person that is friends with Hampton Chambers, but also
everybody's friends with Hampton.
Has the connection. Yeah, that's right, because even the first episode shows that when he's like high-fiving all the prisoners, but also with the Prevost brothers, the people that he owes the debt to.
Yes, but what's the connection? Is like he's drawing him into the criminal lifestyle,
Going back into the criminal lifestyle because they had something prior before he went to jail, but Hampton's wanting to kind of keep clear. He's wanting to not only be clean, just
on the straight and narrow, and yeah, this guy's pulling him back. But why a synagogue? Like, rabbis are not known for having a big safe in the back of their temple.
It was supposed to be after Sabbath, and there's supposed to be, like 2,000.
It's like stealing from the charity bin at a church or whatever.
$3,000, yeah, exactly. That's why Hampton doesn't want to do it.
So $2,000 today's money would be $18,000. So it's not chump change. But do they really make $18,000 every time they spread? Like, maybe at those mega churches.
Maybe back in the 60s, though.
I don't know if people would be forking over that much that quickly. But it's funny how that and Fight Night were both based on like a heist, of some sort. Have we actually seen Hampton conduct the heist or plot it out or do anything other than sell his power drill?
He's just having to use the power drill to try and break into the safe, but we haven't even seen how the heist is going to happen yet.
At least he has a prototype of the power drill, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any predictions as to where this is going? Is his relationship with his wife, his kids getting better as this is happening?
So that's the thing about this show. I'll go into my pros. The sets are nice. There's some really cool shots in there. I think my favorite is even the Prevost brothers backstory shot like an old-time film at the beginning scene of episode 2. I like the frog jumping over the pole vault. There's heart to the show. Like at the end of the first episode, Hampton starts to be more and more accepted back into the family as the series goes on. Even Harrison.
Who could hate the guy? He seems so nice.
Even Harrison by the end of episode 4 is saying how he's probably going to spend more time with him. So I was glad about the heart. The acting in the show was good. Again, it was nice seeing Sunita Mani in the 3rd episode. And the series is short so far. The pilot's 42 minutes, but it's still easy to get through with episodes.
The pilot's 42, and then the next 2 are like the next 3 are what, 30
Episodes 2
minutes?
through 4 are 25 to 30 minutes long, yeah.
So they're short. Yeah, you got it through it in 2 hours. It's funny because he originally pitched this as a movie, and every place said, "No, this is not how we know African American families in the
Well,
'60s to
it
be."
was it was it was strange because the first episode, like I mentioned, Rudy's death felt very thrown in, and although it's referenced throughout the series, his death, and that's the thing that makes him kind of like a Christian, it felt unnecessary. Why start it off with him in prison? Rudy almost felt like like they didn't even need to have him in the show
Well,
because
again, this is based off a real person.
okay, that's fair. But it just seemed like like he was already going to kind of church, already talking to the pastor. In fact, that's where the first episode name comes in when the pastor's telling him
The
about the
Gospel of Kenny
gospel of
Sharp,
Kenny Sharp. Yeah, it's like a kind of modern day David and Goliath story. But the
and Kenny Sharp is the David?
no, Kenny Sharp is actually just someone that left a spoon on the ground. It
Okay,
was
so he's not even the David or the Goliath.
yeah, it was.
He's just the opposite
Yeah,
guy.
yes, yeah. He was kind of the side guy. That was the joke and the thing. But it just felt like that could have been him doing the Christian thing. I didn't feel like we needed to have the accidental death because, like I said, even though they reference it throughout the series, it doesn't really seem like it plays a part.
Sounds like you just don't want Hampton to be a murderer.
I mean, it's not so much that. Like, I understood why they had it. I just didn't think that they needed to. A lot of the subplots also, such as Astoria having an affair, aren't even addressed, while also we've seen them a million times. She does, like I said, a terrible job hiding it, as even the sons, like, are the ones that tell him about it. And Harrison being in a random film that happens in episode 4 because he's trying to find a feather because he was really close to Rudy, and Rudy was saying that the
They're in
feather...
Hollywood. The
Yes,
fact that you just walk in and out of movies, it makes sense, I would think.
it's... But it's
It's kinda like a BoJack thing.
yeah, I mean, but like the show, it seemed like was grounded in some sense of reality. I don't know, it felt off. And then the show, especially after the second episode, doesn't even really focus on Hampton trying to pitch or sell his drill. That was why I liked so much about the
You
first
just
two
wanted to see this
episodes.
drill get sold and then him make a bunch of money and then him get in good graces with his family and
It's
then
more
live a
that
happy life?
the pacing was thrown off because of the subplots, and it just gets lost. Because you were asking about where I thought the series was heading. I have no idea because it feels like it lacks focus.
Okay, so that's gonna be 10 episodes, right? And the second episode is called Trial and Error. Why is it called Trial and Error?
It's called Trial and Error because
Assume it's
that's...
backflash to his actual trial, or
No. Hampton is secured a risky loan by stocking up on pile of toasters, so he's trying to find ways to get money. Because he
I
was...
think it was if it makes sense with him trying to work his drill into production, it's
Yeah.
like a bunch of errors and him trying
Yes.
to okay, got
Right.
it. And then Two Doors is the next one.
Yes, so that all takes place mostly in one building. That's the Edith episode. They made it pretty clear from the beginning that Edith, again, Sunita Mani, she's not real. Like, you can tell that, but he goes into a separate two-door place because he's about to go into the bar to confront his wife, but he decides that he's going to try the alternate route, gets stuck in a room, and then Sunita Mani and him are trying to figure out kind of what he should say to his wife when he's about to confront her.
She's representative of his id or his like below consciousness level, just like kind of working it out. And
Yeah.
then he wakes up at the end and he's like,
It's
I
not
know what
that
to do.
It's not that he wakes up, it's that he kind of confesses all his problems to Edith by the end of the episode. He turns back around and she's not there. But again, the twist was pretty obvious, but I feel like that's probably why it was the director's favorite because it had that whole twist aspect to it.
It might have been the fourth episode that was his favorite, A Long Road Home, though.
Well, after that, as Hampton prepares for the temple heist while forging a deeper bond with Harrison by faking a heartfelt letter.
How does one prepare for a temple heist?
That with his drill. That's what he.
That's
what he's
the
gonna
only
figure
thing
it
he
out.
does. He doesn't like put on a fake yarmulke and then like try to pretend to be Jewish and then sneak his way in there.
From
or
what I
something?
remember out of the 4 episodes, the temple heist is the temple heist is really in the background, and I don't think that we've gotten any plans as to how they're actually going to do it yet.
Okay, all right. So comparisons other than the ones we've gone through, and the ones we've gone through are like Fargo, Wes Anderson, Coen Brothers, Atlanta, I'm a Virgo, which I also thought of as soon as you said it. Woke, Them, Phantasmas, because of the divine intervention. Anything else?
I mean, just the surrealist aspect. I feel like you can pull in any show that's just like
JD and Scrubs when
yes,
he's like having an
those
imagination.
side flashbacks. Also, for some
Futurama.
reason, Lodge 49 comes
Perfect.
to
No,
mind.
other people mentioned Lodge 49. Apple tends to be doing sort of an A24 thing in that way. So Pursuit of Happiness is the one that I thought you wouldn't get to. And that's my comparison to it because that has nothing to do with surreal surrealism. However, if you remember, that's Will Smith as a dad, and he's trying to become a successful entrepreneur after sort of a difficult past instead of a self-sharpening drill. And the reason they did a self-sharpening drill is because Paul worked in the aerospace community before jumping over to music videos and all that stuff. So he has some understanding of those tools and stuff. However, in pursuit of happiness, yeah, he's working to try to regain his relationship with his kid, and show himself to be a good father by just working up from there. And the reason I think that's the most comparable to this show is because the title of the show is Government Cheese.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating because I thought this entire time that government cheese was going to be brought up, the 1940s to 80s thing, the Reagan holding up the block of cheese. I learned about this a long time ago, but that we have these 1.5 billion pounds of cheese stored up underneath America. And there's been all this time where we used to give it to welfare and now we don't. And it's just because of the surplus milk that we have. All it ultimately comes down to is the fact that America, at different points in its time, has used ingenuity in order to get over its problems. And I think, in a vague sense, that's sort of what Hampton is trying to do. He's trying to do anything possible to use ingenuity in order to craft his world into one that he can be proud of.
That, but also I felt like I'm one of my cons was that it was called Government Cheese, and the only reference to it aside from thematically is that Hampton's, or I think it was Astoria in the first episode, talked about how Hampton's mother made the best sandwiches out of government cheese and
Grilled
white
cheese.
bread.
Yeah.
But it was like that's the only connection between the two. So one of my cons is, why is this even called Government Cheese?
Well, I tried to explain that. I tried to give the show an out. I had a lot of fun learning more about the government cheese stuff. We're not the only country by far to store food and cheese. However, it's the idea that Reagan tried to get rid of all of it by dumping it into an ocean just is confounding. The funny thing though is that I don't think we ever reviewed a show that has less like named things. We like to sometimes do the game where I tell you all the other shows or movies that have the same exact title.
Right.
Absolutely nothing else with government cheese.
I think I'll give the show a 6 out of 10 because I like it when it goes surreal. Again, some of my favorite parts are the underwater swimming scene in the first episode, the beginning of the second episode, even the fourth episode starts off with a black and white scene like they're in a movie. Whenever it goes surrealist, whenever it has the heart of Hampton just being this father that's trying to get back into the family's good graces and actually succeeding, I think that's when it's at its best.
Ted Lasso?
Yeah, Ted Lasso, sure, because again, the comedy.
No,
Yeah.
I just meant the heart that
Oh.
goes behind these happy endings.
Yeah, but I think that a big problem is just that the subplots are things you've seen before. The twists are kind of so obvious. The pacing is thrown off because of it. I like 1967. That was an interesting year. I know you said it mostly takes place in 1969, but I had some facts here. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club album was released. The first Super Bowl, Bonnie and Clyde marked the new Hollywood era. So, like, cool. I like the year that they chose, but I just felt like they maybe could have done more with it.
Well, the reviews could be kinder. Variety called it moldy. IGN said the Coen brothers reheated leftovers. The Guardian said it was meaningless. That was a 2-star review.
Wow.
Hollywood Reporter said all build up, and it was too whimsical. However, it was praised by a number of different places for its uniqueness, absurdity. Collider and AV Club both said that. Roger Ebert said Apple TV's Government Cheese is almost great. And then I wanted to answer the question why there was a 4-episode premiere. And a lot of people think that that was because of the cutoff for the Emmys, which is on May 31st.
There needs to be a certain number of episodes aired or something?
I think the entire season has to be done. And so they conclude at May 28th, which is 3 days. And so I think they wouldn't have been able to do that had they released, a different set of episodes. That said, 6 out of 10, it's not the worst review. Did you find yourself laughing every single episode of it?
Yes. No. There's definitely some parts, kind of like you were saying earlier with Guy Ritchie, like there's always that type of humor. And I think that the show is funny. I just think it could have been way better.
I also found it cool that Oyelowo, he seems to be an Apple darling at this point, and so he can jump from, again, the silo. I think he's actually has like a first look agreement with Apple right now. So
He's an executive producer on this.
he is. I don't know if Bootsy or Bootsy is. I think that he was called in. He originally rejected the part, but then he read it again and realized that he really needed to be in it. And they shot it in Hollywood, which apparently is very rare these days. And so it was very expensive.
That's probably why it looks so nice, though. There was a lot of cool shots.
There was that,
in
and
this.
also they made sure to give it like a Polaroid type burn on it so that it kind of looked old fashioned. And that was a directorial thing by Paul, not Paul Revere, Paul Hunter. Yes. So I hope you learned a little bit about Paul Hunter, even if you didn't like the show that much.
I actually had one other thing to say. So in 1967, Thurgood Marshall was the first African American appointed to the Supreme Court. In that same vein, 1967 had the landmark ruling by the Supreme Court that interracial marriage was made legal across the U.S. fully. And I found that interesting because Ronaldo, I think that was his name in the second episode, who Astoria is kind of having the affair with, is white. And so I know that you don't have to, interracial marriage, you don't
Sure.
necessarily.
You could also say David Oyelowo, his wife in Silo was Rashida Jones. So, I mean, they had an interracial
But I'm saying
marriage.
that, if they were to get married, that would have just been in the show's timeline a couple years after this decision was made.
I understand what you're saying. That's cool. I'll also throw in the fact that Oyelowo, just so I have to keep on saying his name, is a prince, or he's some sort of royalty. In I'm not exactly sure where he's from, but it's not like there's a lot of royalty where he's from. That's what he said in interviews. But he is technically, I think, royalty. So
I
that's
didn't
cool.
know that.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.